Welcome to the ultimate everywhere at the end of time iceberg. You know the drill. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Note, extremely obvious, uninteresting, or repetitive entries will be skipped over.
Okay, so most of the Stage 1 and Stage 2 sections are really just basic knowledge that we can glaze over for the most part. Everywhere at the End of Time is a music project comprising 6 albums about the effect that dementia has on the human mind, created by Leyland Kirby under the alias The Caretaker. Using gradually degrading music that distorts and becomes more and more unrecognizable as the project goes on, the project attempts to emulate what happens to the mind as dementia worsens. The songs are all sampled from 1920s to 1940s ballroom-style music, which creates an eerie and antiquated aesthetic. One of the Caretaker's other projects is An Empty Bliss Beyond This World, which is somewhat of a precursor to Everywhere at the End of Time. It also uses old ballroom music and attempts to portray the effects of dementia. It is much shorter and consists of only one album, but it has a similar yet distinct style. Now for some more information on the project itself. The entry Stages 1 to 3 are the lucidity stages, and Stages 4 to 6 are post-awareness, refers to the fact that, for the most part, stages, or albums 1 through 3 of the project are representative of the degrading lucidity of the mind suffering from dementia. The idea is that these stages correspond to the stages of Alzheimer's disease that track the cognitive function of the patient. While all 3 of the stages are definitely distorted and slow, Stage 1 starts off relatively normal, with Stage 2 being slightly more odd, and Stage 3 being the transition stage between lucid and not lucid. Stages 4 to 6 are the post-awareness stages because they represent the stages of the disease after it has been recognized by the patient, but nothing can be done. These albums are the most experimental of the project, being essentially nothing but unintelligible noise that gets worse and worse as it goes on. This goes on until the very end of Stage 6, the final album, which features 6 minutes of lucid music. The final few minutes is intended to represent either the death of the patient or something known as terminal lucidity, a phenomenon where the patient becomes suddenly cognizant again before death. The main 2 leitmotifs of the project are the songs Heartaches and Goodnight My Beautiful by Al Bowley and Russ Morgan respectively. These are both songs from the 30s and 40s era that appear frequently in various ways throughout the 6 albums. Each time they appear, they are different from the last, becoming more distorted and off-putting to emphasize the progression of the disease. Each album is broken down into different tracks, each with their own titles. Some of these track titles are similar to one another and are intended to maintain continuity between the different stages. One of the more terrifying moments in the midst of Stage 4 is something that has been dubbed the Hell Sirens, a loud, siren-like sound that seems to appear out of nowhere. This sound is somewhat of a fan favorite and a milestone in an otherwise completely garbled mess. Another great thing about the project is the art. Each album has its own unique cover. They are all abstract paintings created by the artist Ivan Seal that intend to capture the progression of dementia visually. Each of the paintings depicts something familiar yet uncanny, and they, along with the music, become more unrecognizable as the stages progress. That's it for the first 2 sections of the iceberg, and now we descend into the depths. Glitzholder is the name of the painting that serves as the album cover for Stage 4. Being the first of the post-awareness stages, it perfectly captures the uncanny valley feeling and is the only album cover that looks undeniably human at first glance. While the painting is obviously supposed to look like the profile of a woman, it is painted with such abstract colors and shapes that it gives off a strange and confusing feeling. The woman's eyes are covered by a light blue veil, and her collar and neck seem to be made of what looks like a boot. It can be assumed that the painting is meant to depict how a person might appear to someone with dementia. Glitzholder seems to have been inspired by 2 different paintings. The most famous of the 2 is The Girl with the Pearl Earring. You can see the similarity in the profile angle and the shape and direction of the girl's head garment. Similarly, Triumph of the Duchess Urbino may also have inspired Glitzholder due to the profile shot and the direction of the hair. Nowhere at the Millennium of Space is a fan project inspired by Everywhere at the End of Time that uses 80s and 90s style music to demonstrate the same idea. Created by Jordan Curing, the project emulates the same kind of gradual degradation as the original, clocking in at essentially the same length of 6.5 hours as well. It is also broken into 6 different stages, each with many individual tracks, along with the album covers that attempt to make the graphic style of the 80s and 90s into something blank and eerie. This is one of the most well-done fan projects on the list. Everywhere in the Beginning of Nowhere is arguably the best fan project created so far. Created by the channel The Care Bear, who was 14 at the time by the way, the project essentially does the same thing as the original, only using different samples and ends up being actually an hour longer. It perfectly emulates the style of the original while adding its own unique twist in a lot of ways. The artwork is done in a similar fashion, but plays more on the use of different color schemes and obscure objects. The project manages to be so in line with the original by using a similar selection of samples, as well as another Al Bowlly song as one of the main motifs. There's much more that can be said about the project, and I discussed it a lot more in my fan projects video. The link will be in the description. This refers to how the song Heartaches by Al Bowlly appears on 3 separate occasions throughout the project. The song appears in Stage 1's A1, It's Just a Burning Memory, Stage 2's C3, What Does It Matter How My Heart Breaks, and Stage 3's E2 and Heartbreaks. Each one gets progressively more eerie and strange. Using the same song throughout as a leitmotif allows for the degradation to seem more apparent and noticeable to the listener, and the song seems to embody the project itself as it gets more and more ill. That Leyland Kirby was inspired by the Stanley Kubrick film The Shining is evident most of all through his name, the Caretaker. This is the title given to the main character of the film, Jack Torrance, as he is employed as the caretaker of a hotel during the winter. The film follows Jack's delve into insanity as the supernatural power of the Overlook Hotel takes over his mind. It's easy to see how such a movie inspired the kind of art made by Leyland Kirby. The lonely and liminal imagery of the hotel, the theme of gradual mental degradation, and most notably, the use of Al Bowlly's Midnight, the Stars, and You, which happens to be one of the main themes in Everywhere at the Beginning of Nowhere, are all reasons to show just how much he was inspired by the film. Granada is the name of the musical piece sampled in Stage 4 to create the Hell Sirens. When listening to the Hell Sirens, it's pretty much impossible to guess what the sample actually is, or if it's even sampling anything. That being said, seeing the original sound is actually a violin is pretty astounding. Selected Memories from the Haunted Ballroom is the Caretaker's debut album from all the way back in 1999. It is, like all of Kirby's other work, highly experimental. Naturally, it is inspired by The Shining, playing off the imagery and music from the 1920s era ballroom music and ghostly themes of the movie, the name Haunted Ballroom being a reference to the ballroom in the Overlook Hotel, which is, of course, haunted. It uses Al Bowlly's Midnight, the Stars, and You from the ending scene of The Shining in its final track. When listening to it, you can see how much this original project under the Caretaker name inspired his later work. While the project does not directly reference dementia, it's clear how such a concept could eventually be introduced. Everywhere and Empty Bliss is the final project by Kirby under the Caretaker name that was released alongside the final stage of Everywhere at the End of Time. The album uses tracks that were cut from the previous Caretaker projects and acts as a kind of bonus stage for Everywhere at the End of Time. Some have even called it an alternate Stage 3, since it acts similarly as a kind of transition between the intelligible and distorted music between the stages. This refers to the fact that dementia actually has 7 defined stages rather than 6 as the project portrays. The actual first stage of dementia is the stage every normal person is in, that being no cognitive decline. Really, you could consider that as a kind of stage 0 and allow the stage 6 model to remain accurate. Regardless, the project is technically inaccurate in that way. Everywhere at the End of Time with Voices is a remarkable fan project created by Dante Timberwolf that pieces together all of the original samples used and makes use of the vocals in them rather than just the instruments. This creates a much more disturbing and noticeably distorted feeling, with the first track already sounding very creepy from the start. Hearing each of the songs with voices as they become more and more distorted is very unsettling and truly adds a unique twist on the project. History Always Favors the Winners is the name of the music label created by Leland Kirby to compile his ambient music projects. Everywhere at the End of Time is included in this label along with many of his other projects. Grand Canyon Suite is the name of a collection of orchestra music that is sampled in Stage 2. The song Painted Desert from the suite appears in C4, Glimpses of Hope in Trying Times, and the song Sunrise appears in D1, I Still Feel As Though I Am Me. These are some of the more somber and haunting tracks in the early stages. This entry refers to the fact that the music video version of Stage 1 replaces the track B3 Quiet Internal Rebellions with the track E8 Long-Term Dusk Glimpses. Why this small change was made for the music video, I have no idea, but it is a difference between the music video and the purely instrumental version. People reacting to Everywhere at the End of Time via livestream is one of the many reasons the project became so popular. The project, being a whopping 6.5 hours long, gained itself the status of a kind of challenge to sit through and listen to in its entirety. It became a trend to show off your reaction to the music, especially as it gets more and more distorted and difficult to listen to. Many of these reaction videos have emotional endings where people cry because of the song at the end. Likewise, full-scale reviews of the project also launched it further into popularity, something that we did on this channel as well back in the day. Link again is in the description. This refers to the fact that the Stage 3 album cover created by Ivan Seal is titled Hag. There is much speculation about what this is meant to depict, with most agreeing that it is some kind of overgrown potted plant. While this is technically just a fan theory, it's pretty evident that this is the intention. The Stage 5 album cover is super abstract and weird, and it perfectly encapsulates the idea of dementia causing the mind to confuse things. The image kind of looks like a person walking down a set of stairs, but the colors, the shapes, and the overall design is so visually perplexing that it is unrecognizable. Take Care, It's a Desert Out There is the name of another ambient music album by The Caretaker that was created in memory of Mark Fisher. Mark Fisher was an author, music critic, political commentator, and teacher who died in January of 2017. He went by the alias K-Punk and was a friend of Leland Kirby, having been a big name in the hauntology genre. The album fits in with the Caretaker style and even has an Ivan Seal cover that fits with the style of Everywhere at the End of Time. VVM and The Stranger are two other aliases used by Leland Kirby. Each of the projects released under these names are also in the ambient music genre. Kirby would go on to make a record label called VVM Test Records, which is where the name of his YouTube channel comes from, VVM Test. This entry refers to the fact that some of the samples used in Everywhere at the End of Time were taken from wax cylinders, a very old form of audio storage. This is a testament to the lengths Kirby went to use actual music from the era the project is based on. The Guildford Cathedral Choir is a choir whose recordings are sampled in multiple places throughout Everywhere at the End of Time. It's believed that a song recorded by the choir is also the sample used in the last few minutes of Stage 6, but the original has never been found. In Stage 5's K1, there is a moment where the garbled audio switches to a few seconds of a clear melody, which samples the song Was It a Dream by Dick Powell. This moment is impactful for a handful of reasons. It's intended to represent a moment of clarity, or a moment of sudden lucidity in the patient, where suddenly everything makes sense again and memories have returned. Sadly, the moment doesn't last long and it quickly turns back into a distorted mess. This kind of event in the project would be interesting and emotional regardless of what song was used for it, but the use of "was it a dream" makes it even better. It's as though the patient has awoken and wonders if what has happened up to this point, the progression of the illness, was only a dream. This is easily one of the most fascinating moments in the entire project. A Stairway to the Stars is another ambient music album released by the Caretaker in May of 2002. It is akin to his other projects and is most like Selected Memories from the Haunted Ballroom. Likewise, Deleted Scenes, Forgotten Dreams is an ambient music album released in July of 2007, the album cover of which was made by Guy Denning rather than Ivan Seal. And We'll All Go Riding on a Rainbow is, you guessed it, another ambient music album released in July of 2003 by the Caretaker. This refers to the fact that the Stage 2 album cover has two human figures hidden in the artwork. On both sides of the potted plant-looking object, there appears to be a man and a woman dancing, dark spots where their faces would be. The same can be said about the cover for Take Care, It's a Desert Out There. Wilhelm Lyons is the name of a creator who made 3 separate fan projects for Everywhere at the End of Time, each one representing some form of afterlife. There's one for Hell, Heaven, and Purgatory. Each of them are pretty much what you'd expect. This entry refers to an extremely long fan project with a total of 9 stages, clocking in at almost 12 hours long. Inspired by Everywhere at the End of Time, it represents a very similar situation. This is its description. All the Grand Memories of All the Years is a Caretaker-inspired project which features the mental decline of a fictional Alzheimer's patient in great detail. The patient's name is Matthew Lewis, who was born on October 1st, 1889. He was officially diagnosed with Alzheimer's around the late 1950s, although he has shown signs of decline since 1954. His case was unique. He progressed through his disease at a very slow pace compared to the majority of patients. Most Alzheimer's patients often live only 9 to 10 years at most after the diagnosis. Matthew lived for 13 years before sadly passing away on a cool January night in 1971. Leighton and Johnstone are the names of a musical duo from the 1920s to 30s. They had a great success in their day, yet perhaps now their legacy lives on through being sampled quite frequently and everywhere at the end of time. This Iceberg chart says they are the most sampled in the entire project, so I'm just going to take that as true without checking. This refers to the numerous fan theories about what exactly the hell sirens are supposed to represent. Some believe the sound is supposed to represent some kind of actual siren, like an air raid siren or some other war-related alarm. Some think it is just a generally scary noise intended to indicate some traumatic memory, or perhaps simply the trauma of the disease itself. Given some information later in the Iceberg, it may well be the case that it is intended to represent some kind of memory from the Second World War. Stage 3's E7, Bewildered in Other Eyes, is an extremely unnerving track that sounds like a child's musical wind-up toy. Music, and perhaps even the title, some have theorized that this short track is intended to represent a childhood memory. Perhaps it is so creepy and off-putting to indicate the memory becoming distorted and forgotten. Oddly enough, the artwork platform Weirdcore.tv published music videos for stages 1 and 2 of Everywhere at the End of Time. These videos are mostly the same, with the camera panning through a 3D environment of a mansion or large hotel of some kind, with blurry and distorted images projected onto all the surfaces. There are no music videos for any of the other stages, but these do a decent job at capturing the feeling of the music in a visual style. Hang on, if you're not subscribed and you like this content, subscribe. You'll get to see the videos sooner and support the channel. Only a handful of our viewers are actually subbed, so please give it a try. In Stage 5's K1, there is a brief section in which actual words can be heard. The voice of a radio announcer says, "This selection will be a mandolin solo by Mr. James Fitzgerald." This is followed by, you guessed it, a mandolin solo. It is very distorted, but it marks one of the few places in the later stages that contain intelligible music, and to my knowledge, is the only place in the entire project in which there are actual intelligible words. The mandolin solo is an excerpt of El Captain March, although it was originally believed to be the Invincible Eagle March until user NoEntrance5638 discovered it wasn't. The Hell Sirens from Stage 4 actually reappear in both Stages 5 and 6. Neither of these later occurrences are nearly as prominent or noticeable as the first, but they are there. PM Why Bees Are Very Silent is the title of the painting that serves as the album cover for Everywhere in Empty Bliss. The album cover actually cuts off part of the full painting, in which there are several dead bees lying below the abstract wall of colors, hence the title of the piece. We Drink to Forget the Coming Storm is an album released by the Caretaker in 2014 to celebrate his 40th birthday. Different from his usual projects, the music, though it is still certainly ambient, is much clearer than what is typical for him. Theoretically Pure Anterograde Amnesia is another album by the Caretaker released in 2006. It is the normal ambient music, but it plays off the idea of amnesia, a clear precursor to Everywhere at the End of Time. In 2019, Ivan Seal and Leyland Kirby held an art exhibition at an art house in France. The exhibition was apparently titled Everywhere in Empty Bliss, after Kirby's album of the same name. The exhibition saw Ivan Seal's art on display with an apparently alternate version of the Caretaker's albums playing. I don't think there exists an actual complete recording of whatever was playing at the event, but the idea of being able to physically see the real paintings while listening to the music made to go with them is pretty awesome. As far as I know, Kirby created the post-awareness stages using a computer program that essentially mixed all of the sounds together into a distorted mess. He handpicked the sections as he deemed best and modified them from there. Due to this process, there were many hours of that kind of audio that went completely unused. I can only imagine sitting through and listening to all that. Everywhere at the End of Time, again, reincarnated, is another fan project created by Wilhelm Lyons that plays off a type of afterlife concept. Rather than representing heaven or hell, the project is simply a recreation of the original, but the patient has been reincarnated only to get dementia again. The project uses most of the same samples as the original and has similar looking stage album covers. It is very, very well done and is good if you want a similar project to the original. It's tragically funny to imagine being reincarnated as yet another dementia patient. Solar Sands is a relatively popular YouTuber that makes videos on all kinds of topics. A couple years ago, when the Caretaker was gaining popularity, Solar Sands made a video about the concept of memory loss and art. Naturally, he included a section discussing the Caretaker and Everywhere at the End of Time, which introduced a large audience of people to the project and Leyland Kirby's works in general. There were many factors that contributed to the rise in popularity of Everywhere at the End of Time, and this was certainly one of them. When listening to Stage 6, you might think that it's just random white noise, but in reality, the samples are discernible. People have sped up the extremely slowed down tracks to reveal what the original songs sound like. While the final track is relatively untouched, by speeding it up, it can also be heard in a much more clear and normal fashion. As we have mentioned before, Al Bowley is one of the most used and most recognizable samples in all of the Caretaker's works. Not only was he an extremely famous artist from the period and genre that the Caretaker's works center around, but his song Midnight, the Stars and You was famously used in The Shining, perfectly tying together the entire Caretaker aesthetic. What is particularly tragic about Al Bowley is his untimely death. Despite not ever being in combat, Al Bowley was killed in World War II. Here is a description. He was killed by a Luftwaffe parachute mine that detonated outside his flat at 3:10 in the morning. His body appeared unmarked. Although the explosion had not disfigured him, it had blown his bedroom door off its hinges, and the impact against his head was fatal. He was buried with other bombing victims in a mass grave at Hanwell Cemetery, where his name is given as Albert Alex Bowley. Interestingly enough, this fact may have inspired some things in Kirby's works. Some have theorized that the Hell Sirens are an attempt at recreating a traumatic World War II memory. Most interestingly, in Selected Memories from the Haunted Ballroom, which ends with Al Bowley's Midnight the Stars and You, there is a track titled September 1939, the month and year when World War II began. This is what it sounds like. Tonight All Seems Blue and Dark is the unofficial title of a song performed live by Leland Kirby at a concert in France in 2018. Performed is somewhat of a loose term considering it is just a recording of the song, though his stage presence and mannerisms make it a very unique kind of concert. Most people don't think of any of Kirby's songs being concert-worthy, and I can only imagine how he might perform the entirety of Everywhere at the End of Time live. Everywhere in Empty Bliss could be seen as a kind of alternate version of the actual Stage 3 album. While it isn't intended to be that and is simply a compilation of unused tracks, the mix between intelligible and distorted tracks make it very similar in style to Stage 3. CJD is a fan project created by Matthew Eater that intends to represent the decline of a patient with the disease CJD rather than dementia. CJD is another kind of disease that causes memory loss as well as a number of other mental troubles. It's much shorter than most Caretaker fan projects, which makes it easier to listen to. The Forgotten Orchestra is the name of yet another fan project created by the Caretaker, the creator of Everywhere in the Beginning of Nowhere. It is 7 hours long and emulates the original project pretty much perfectly. It goes to show how well the genre clicked with the Caretaker that he was able to create multiple full-length projects that perfectly capture the feeling of the original, artwork and all. Remember Us is the title of a piano piece composed by Leland Kirby. This is one of the few Kirby songs that have a music video attached to it, and this one is one of the most unique. It shows a man playing the piano as distorted images slowly fade in and out over the screen. As the video goes on, the video becomes more and more distorted until the entire screen is black. It seems to touch on the idea of remembering those who have gone before you and the contemplation of history. The piece is very somber yet intense, and the music video helps with the tragic sounding aesthetic. This refers to a kind of stupid theory that the Stage 3 album cover hides a secret message within the branching leaves and shapes of the plant-like object. I can see how someone might think this considering some of the formations kind of resemble numbers or letters. Somebody on the Caretaker subreddit claimed that the message was the numbers 3973, connecting it to the name of some heart attack related pill that can cause dementia. Seems completely made up and arbitrary. This is a fan theory that stems from the fact that some of the samples are still unknown to this day. It is possible that some of the samples are not really samples at all and are actually pieces created and used by Kirby himself. This is unlikely considering the entire project along with most of Kirby's works are made using samples. The truth is, some of the samples might be so obscure that they simply aren't on the internet and were taken from physical copies by Kirby rather than ones created by him. This Is Romance is the name of the song famously sampled in the opening track for An Empty Bliss Beyond This World. The version in An Empty Bliss is very normal and actually pretty fun to listen to. However, it is also sampled in Stage 6, where it is almost impossible to make out. The track in Stage 6 has to be sped up for the sample to be even remotely recognized, but it's there. This is a classic fan theory that some of the tracks used throughout the Caretaker's various dementia-related projects are actually sampled from real nursing homes. This is not very likely considering Kirby went to considerable lengths to get physical samples from records and such, but it's fun to think that some of the songs really came from the kind of environment the project is portraying. Surprisingly, a song by Leyland Kirby was almost aired in an ad for the PlayStation. The ad depicts a dramatic scene from what looks like the Vietnam War, where a soldier is killed just as another was about to rescue him. He dramatically holds the fallen soldier in his arms before running back to the helicopter. The dead soldier then turns into a girl who is implied to be the player of the character in a video game, and the phrase "Play Forever" appears on the screen. This is a play on the song used in the ad, Forever Young, only it's remixed to sound extremely creepy. How and why this was chosen is very strange, and the fact that it was done by Kirby is so odd. The ad was, of course, never actually aired. Kirby himself is the top comment on an upload of the ad on YouTube, where he says, "Funnily enough, the reason this advert never made it to the air was because of an internal dispute at the advertising agency. This was made in South Africa, but London held the Sony account. Despite Sony wanting to run the ad, the agency pulled rank with the London office and never made it to broadcast." Zatsu Ongaku is another album by Leyland Kirby under the VVM alias. This one is extremely weird. Here's a clip. You may remember the fan project Nowhere at the Millennium of Space from earlier in the Iceberg. You may also remember the fan project Everywhere at the End of Time with voices. This entry is a fan project that combines the two ideas. That's right, a fan project of a fan project. This project adds the voices from the original samples to Nowhere at the Millennium of Space for a horrifying special edition of the original. It's crazy to think of how dedicated the fan community is that there are literally fan projects based on other fan projects. Sound of Insanity is another fan project that acts as a twist on the original concept. Rather than being made with samples from the 20th century, it portrays the mind of someone with dementia living in the 2070s and 80s. This project uses entirely EDM music, and it's quite the wild ride. There is also a revisited version which bumps up the runtime from 2 hours to the full 6.5, putting it on par with the Caretaker's original. This is a simple theory that reads exactly as the title says. Because the album is about dementia, many theorize that listening to it, especially repeatedly, could cause the listener to develop dementia. Obviously, this isn't true, but it added an extra layer of allure back when the project was trending online. The sixth stage of Everywhere at the End of Time has the most unique album cover. It's simply a canvas with blue tape making a square. There are a couple theories about this, but one popular one is that the other album covers are basically paintings on canvases, but the last one is an empty canvas, and that's what the cover is. There's a lot of theories about what exactly it's supposed to mean, and it's all pretty interesting. This is one of the Caretaker's other albums that was released in 2008. The reason this one is so low is because of the obscurity of the actual release. This album is only 30 minutes, consisting of 16 tracks from other works, such as Theoretically Pure Anterograde Amnesia or Persistent Repetition of Phrases. These samples from other tracks were combined to create this album that the Caretaker presented at an event that was located at the Museum of Garden History. This entry is referring to one of the Caretaker's side projects under the alias VVM, where he plays about 13 minutes of pigs apparently being slaughtered. According to the fan wiki, critics mistook the noises of pigs being fed for pigs dying in a slaughterhouse. Honestly, when I first listened to it after looking at this entry, I believed the same thing. However, the audio is from Kirby's uncle's actual pig farm, and it's just the pigs being fed. The wording for this entry is a little weird, but as we mentioned before, Theoretically Pure Anterograde Amnesia is one of the Caretaker's earlier albums about the disease in the title. The disease anterograde amnesia is a condition that causes a person to be unable to make new memories. Because of this, the album is split into 6 CDs, which has 72 unique memories, or 12 per CD. This entry is referring to the fact that each memory appears in order as it does on the sample track. For example, Memory 1 of CD 1 takes a sample of Swedish Rhapsody, which is track 1 of Mantovani in Europe. This is true for all tracks that appear in this project. This entry is pretty simple to understand. Basically, the theory goes that all of the Caretaker's albums, from Selected Memories from the Haunted Ballroom to the most recent, Everywhere and Empty Bliss, is a connected timeline. The theory mixes certain stages of albums between the clarity of Stage 1 to having the jumbled messes of A Stairway to the Stars and Stage 6. Everywhere But the Center of Your Mind is another fan project that portrays the progression of depression. Interestingly, this project includes a proper Stage 0, which is made up of entirely normal, untouched songs. The albums, as you could expect, slowly degrade into complete distortion. The album covers for this project are particularly well done, and the reception of this 8-hour-long work has been very positive. Earlier in the Iceberg, we talked about CJD, the fan project created to portray the disease of the same name. CJD is a form of dementia that causes very rapid mental decline, and that is exactly what Fading at the Speed of Light intends to portray. Created by the user The Caretaker, the project is split into 6 stages, only they are much shorter than what is typical for these kinds of things, with the whole thing coming in at only 1 hour and 23 minutes. It is done this way so that it better demonstrates the rapid nature of the disease. Spanish Flea is the name of an extremely popular song used in many pieces of media. It's often used as a kind of transition song or an old-fashioned "we'll be right back" tune. It was popularized by its use in the 1960s television game show The Dating Game. The rendition of the song by Mantovani and his orchestra is actually used in the Caretaker's Theoretically Pure Anterograde Amnesia. Everything Until Now is another fan project created by the user The Traveler. It is a 6-stage project that similarly portrays the descent into dementia. What's interesting is there is no one video that compiles all 6 stages, the creator simply has them all separate still. This project is a few years old and none of the stages have very many views, making this a rather obscure entry. This is a fan project created by the artist SVR. SVR is most famous for the project Stage 0 Pseudo Dementia, but that album is an audible experience of going through treatment-resistant depression and mental deterioration. The album originally released in December of 2021, but it's currently incomplete. The Most Mysterious Song on the Internet is a popular, unidentified song that gained internet fame in 2019. It's commonly agreed to be some sort of European song from the 1980s. Natmos, which has been talked about before in this Iceberg, also samples 1980s and 90s music to create a similar feeling to Everywhere at the End of Time. Many fans of the project have said that this mysterious historical song would have fit perfectly as the terminal lucidity for this album. This entry is very simple but interesting. Although I couldn't find any specific examples, apparently the album has been played on a few radio stations. I can't imagine tuning into the radio and hearing some of the portions of this album play, especially if it was uninterrupted for the full 6.5 hours. For our final entry, this one talks about the Caretaker as the subject of Everywhere at the End of Time. Samples throughout the album appear from as early as 1899 and as late as 1970, making the subject of the album approximately 70 to 75 years old as they are going through the stages of dementia. This is merely a fan theory, but definitely adds to the intrigue of the project. Well, that was the entire ultimate Everywhere at the End of Time Iceberg explained. If you made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.